Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is one of those games that when it gets brought up in conversation, everybody immediately tries to leave. But is it actually that bad? If you look for reviews, it certainly does seem that way. Between lacking gameplay, terrible map design, questionable design choices, and retconning a lot of the Fallout lore that was established in the first two titles. But as someone who is finally going back and replaying the older games that I didn't get to have a chance to when I was younger, I wanted to give this game as fair as a take as I could. So today, we'll find out if Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was actually that bad, or if it was just too big a depart from what people were used to. So Fallout Brotherhood of Steel opens up with the typical Fallout spiel about how grand the days were in the 50s, and then that bombs had to come and ruin everything. The intro goes on to explain that the horrors of the wasteland were rampant and changing life as we knew it, but the Brotherhood of Steel were here to defend what was left of humankind, allegedly. But with the typical Fallout setting established, now I was able to pick my character. I had a choice between a buff guy named Cyrus, a lady named Nadia, and a ghoul named Kane. But since this is the only time where playing as a ghoul was a first pick, you already know I had to play him. Now this is one of those weird design choices, so in the prior couple of games you actually got to make your character and select your special stats and then pick perks along as you went. The difference in this game is that each character has their own special stats already assigned to them, but honestly, because you never get to see them, they all play exactly the same. Yeah, sure, some characters can use heavy weapons and some can't, some can wear some types of armor, some are a little bit more agile, but at the core of it all, they each play exactly the same. They all can use melee weapons, they all can use ranged weapons, they all can wear all the different types of armor that they want, meaning that any character can really do whatever you want. Next, I was introduced to Carbon, but I immediately stopped listening to the narrator as I saw our ghoul character waltz onto the screen. Like, goddamn, homie, you're gonna need to calm down with all that swagger. But now with introductions out of the way and the lack of clothes from female characters, I got to talking with some of the NPCs in the area. It turns out that the first quest I was given was to eradicate a bar full of drunk raiders, which seems pretty par for the course in Fallout games. However, because I didn't know how to equip any items, I thought my only weapon at my disposal was my fists, which frankly on normal difficulty did take care of most of the raiders, but not enough to avoid dying twice to this one area. Make sure you play through the tutorial, kids. But I'm honestly just gonna chalk this up to just me being bad at the game. After learning how to properly equip items, I managed to go through and completely eviscerate everybody in sight, gaining some XP and some caps. And upon talking to the bar owner, even earned another quest involving rad scorpion tails. For every one I brought back, I'd get 10 caps and a bit of experience, which at this point in the game, that just seems like a no-brainer. I don't know why you wouldn't just do that. After returning to the woman outside and letting her know that I had murdered a whole score of individuals for seemingly no reason at all, I was then left to my own devices. Which this just meant I walked around and talked to literally everyone I could. I wandered around the town for a little bit until I eventually met the mayor of Carbon. He informed me that he had a warehouse full of rad scorpions for whatever reason, and that it needed cleared out. And this is where my first complaint with the game comes to. Up until this point, I thought combat was fine. It's not anything to write home about, but in the realm of a twin-stick shooter, it does okay. In fact, I actually thought it was kind of fun. At points, but we'll get into that later. But for the beginning of the game, Kane being a more melee-focused character seemed cracked. The melee weapons in the beginning of the game seemed absolutely busted. I was beating the shit out of literally anything that had any kind of vital signs, and due to the passive regeneration that I had, I was getting away with murder scot-free. But the major problem was there was an amount of rad scorpions I had to kill before I could move into the next area. Which is fine, most games have this sort of system in place. The difference is, generally when you get down to the last, 3 or 4 enemies, they usually show up on the map where they are. In this game, I got stuck looking for one single rad scorpion. Again, it's not the end of the world, this sort of stuff is fixed later in games because people have gotten lazy about finding stuff. However, with the size of some of these areas and how tight it can be to navigate, this just felt like unnecessary padding. With the scorpions finally cleared out, I returned to the mayor and got tasked with tracking down some Brotherhood members that ventured into a crater nearby. But the crater, besides having a cool name, was just another ground for bug stomping. But hey, at least I got a sweet torch that made killing them faster. After what seemed like tons of scorpions being sent to the desert and sky, I made it to the crater mentioned only to find the mayor. It turns out this was all an elaborate trap due to the fact that some half-naked lady said she wouldn't stomp on him if I was still alive. Too bad for the mayor that I had the power of a flaming stick, so he wouldn't be around for his next stone stomping. Word of my mayor's slaughter seemed to reach far and wide as the town of Carbon was now on fire when I came back, which meant it was time for yet another kill everything that moves mission. And frankly, this was starting to wear on me. Because it was still a newish experience, it was tolerable, and having chat along for the ride made it for a nice banter, but I can definitely see why people had issues with this game if this is all it is. After clearing out the town, I met up with the local merchant who drove me out to where the raider base was located, and you guessed it, it was time for more hacking and slashing. And then a boss fight with the matron. But due to a ripper I had found, Homegirl didn't even stand a chance. After arriving back in town, I met up with the Vault Dweller from the first game, and the game crashed. Well, not really, but the menu to save disappeared, which meant I had to navigate a menu to save and allow the game to proceed. This was nerve-wracking because at this point the game had crashed like 3 or 4 times, and I honestly thought I was going to be stuck here and this was going to be the end of the video. But between the powers of just clicking a bunch of buttons and hoping for the best, I finally got the game to continue! Now heading into chapter 2, this is where the difficulty ramped up, but also got laughably easy. Let me explain. We arrive in the city of Los, a pleasant area on everyone's vacation list filled with the most beautiful people imaginable. But besides the sights and the giant hulking disturbed mascot on the loose, I was here to find missing Brotherhood members. I mingled with the townsfolk and found Harold. This is probably the most reoccurring character in the entire Fallout franchise. I asked him about the missing Brotherhood members, and he did recall someone coming by this area, but some ghoul cult and super mutants were running around the docks, so it wasn't safe for any of the less violent ghouls to go that way. However, Harold had a quest for me if I was hell-bent on heading in that direction. See, he was looking a little worse for wear, so much in fact that he needed me to go find his missing body parts in the surrounding areas. Considering this guy had been in at least 4 Fallout games, I decided to help a homie out. Except, I never actually did. I chatted up some of the other ghouls in the area, one being a merchant with a gladiator ring, which you could fight in to make some money, and money was definitely going to be needed as I immediately blew all I had just to get some power gauntlets. And the other was an artisan who made things out of junk. But with all these NPCs out to welcome me, this lured me into a false sense of safety, as the very next room would rock my shit. The difficulty jump was immediately noticeable. Whereas the raiders of the first act were using the dregs of a long-dead society, being mainly ballistic weapons, the ghouls were packing combat shotguns, rippers, and laser technology of all things. Meaning that for a lot of the opening area, I was running for my life. Regardless of the fact that I could easily solo any of these clowns, all it took to put me down were 2 or more ghouls with big weapons. So with panic as my fuel and an unknown location as my goal, I ran past enemies until I had gained enough money to finally get some upgrades back at town. As far as location aesthetics and quests go, this place easily takes the cake. Mainly because of the fact that there were no kill X amount of enemy quests, but also for the fact that I had a way to grind out better gear in doing the gladiator arena. Yeah, the enemies may have been a bit tough in the beginning, but after some new drip, I was the one taking the fight to the citizens of Los. Los easily takes the cake for the best design, out of all the locations you'll visit in Brotherhood of Steel. On top of that, the enemies don't ever overwhelm you, and as long as you have stimpaks and a decent weapon, you can clear out all of the hordes with little to no fuss. But stimpaks are a double-edged sword, but we'll get into that later. Continuing in, I found a super sick altar made out of a Vault Boy statue, and just further up the road came to the second major boss of the playthrough. Inside this building was a chained up Brotherhood member named Rhombus of all things. He complained about how the Brotherhood let a ghoul into the group, and honestly I was just as confused as he was, and that I didn't bring enough reinforcements, but seeing he didn't really have any choice, he asked me to go find the key to set him free. Only issue is, I had to get it off the local Church of the Lost Boss. Except I wouldn't have to go too far as he barged into the room and started rambling on about how great his 5-Finger Death Punch fan club was. And then the fight started. At first this seemed like just a normal melee enemy. Don't get hit by their weapon and get in a couple of attacks between swings. Pretty basic procedure. Except the range that Blake had was insane! It seemed like he could hit me from anywhere in the room even if I was seemingly out of reach. But the worst part of this fight was when he lost a third of his health, Blake all of a sudden increased his speed, and now I could barely stay away to get any type of attack off, whether it was melee or ranged, and sadly, I died. And again. And again. Chat by this point had been telling me to go back and buy stim packs for the longest time, so I decided to finally listen. But in any type of game where you have melee, what if you just out-heal the damage being done to you? What if I just bought so many stim packs that I could just out-heal any damage that Blake dealt? Would that even work? Hey, let's go. As always, if you want to succeed in life, just buy as many stim packs as you can and heal through the damage. Now with the key to Rhombus' cell, I freed Homie from his confines, and he told me that the whole reason the Brotherhood were even here in the first place is due to a vault entrance that the super mutants were trying to break into, Vault 1. But to get to the vault, I'd have to do an escort mission, because everybody loves escort missions in the early 2000s. And this was stressful! Rhombus, for some reason, was running headfirst into every single motherfucking enemy that we came across. And after watching his life bar empty out, honestly, this whole thing had me stressing. However, I will give this game credit where credit is due. Rhombus seemed immortal, so I don't really understand the whole point for the escort mission in the first place. So with that worry out of the way, I just kept continuing to follow him until we got to what I'm assuming was the entrance. Except it was actually just a dock warehouse. He did inform me that inside the building would be the place to go, but then disaster struck. Because it seems that only cutscenes can actually kill people in this game. But with the knowledge that the vault entrance I was looking for was hiding here somewhere, I immediately ran away, only to be greeted by the entire ghoul population of Los and heavy super mutant resistance. Except these guys may as well have been doing nothing. Between my high armor rating and my heavy hitting punching fists and the sheer amount of stim packs I had, there was no way in hell I was going down to any of this. Without too much of a slog later, I arrived at the vault entrance. Now, as interesting as the first areas were, this is where the game heads downhill. But before I show you why, let me give you hands down the best cutscene I've ever seen in gaming history.
When God duty over, Bob, me have to go body. Just wait. God duty is almost over. But me have to go bad. Okay. You go, I'll stay. No!
This thing will live rent-free in my head forevermore. Pushing into the vault, I got to a new terminal that I could use to purchase new items, and seeing that we were now moving into Tesla armor, you can bet your socks that I was going to have to do an entirely new set of upgrades. But like always, I started with the weapon first. Moving forward into Vault 1, it was clear that the Vault Dwellers had already met the super mutant entourage head-on, with blood and viscera being sprayed all over the walls. But the biggest threat of all were these bug things. I don't know what they are, I don't know where they came from, I don't know what their lore significance is, but fuck these guys. They ate through my armor like it was nothing, and I died more times than I would like to admit, even trying so much as to lure them into super mutants only to watch the super mutants get ripped apart. Man, fuck these things. I did, after a lot of kiting and stim packs, take them out though, only to meet more super mutants and now robot resistance. This vault was being ransacked, and even though I could kill everything, this area would grow to be my least favorite by far. Exploring vaults in the 3 Fallout games were always exciting as to finding out what kind of experiments were conducted here, but here, all I was greeted by were hordes and hordes of enemies, and the same enemies to bat. Look at Diablo for a second. Yes, they all use a ton of similar looking enemies, but they also have variants thrown in to change up the gameplay, like wallers or just something to spice up the combat. Because in Vault 1, I spent an hour running through the same looking areas, killing the same enemies, and between my armor, weapons, and stim packs, I was starting to get bored. But the problem is since these areas throw so much at you, you have to play this way. Meaning unless I purposely wanted to torture myself, this is what the rest of the playthrough was going to look like. And that's the double edge with stim packs, is you need them to stay alive, but by having too many of them, you can't die and all challenge of the game is taken away. While wandering around through lookalike area number 33, I bumped into Attis, the leader of the super mutant invasion. Except there were some issues with this. See, Attis was happy he bumped into me because I had the key to go to the lower levels of the vault, allegedly. The key that Blake had on the surface, that also unlocked Rhombus's chains. The fuck was I holding, a skeleton key? On top of that, Attis never explained what the lowers of the vault actually did, but did say that he and his army were remnants of the Master's army from Fallout 1, and they were planning to use the vault as a starting point to take the fight to the Humies upstairs. I didn't have any other choice but to stop this, so naturally I had to kill him. Although, much like with Blake, if you have enough healing supplies, you're pretty much golden. But I did notice that as the boss's health got lower, they turned into Sonic for some reason. But Attis wouldn't take his defeat lying down. Oh no. A cutscene played out, and not only did he look unscathed, but he also cut my arm off and threw me into a dark-ass pit. Only for me to end up in one of the most hectic escort missions. My character with one arm had to follow after a vault girl who was allegedly leading me to safety through the back alleys of Ohio. Making it to the next area, and through the power of cutscenes, I received a prosthetic to get my swinging arm back. After speaking with some of the vault survivors, I was now tasked with escorting a technician deeper into the vault to repair a computer console, allowing me to venture even deeper and open a ventilation system for the vault dwellers to leave through. Except, where all of the escort missions up to this point had been unfailable, this technician was hellbent on aggroing every robot in the area, and boy did he love catching lasers with his teeth. Somehow I got lucky and distracted the robots long enough while he fiddled with some machines, only to be rewarded by more of the same tile set and more of the same robot enemies. Look, I know vaults all look one way, I get it, but this entire place just felt like it was copy-pasted over and over again, only with laser puzzles thrown in to pad game time. Because why the fuck would there be laser puzzles in a vault that people lived in? Up until the vault section, I was genuinely having fun and only mildly poking fun at the game and some of its outdated mechanics. But here, as time went on, the fun was beginning to fade. We were too strong with too much money and not enough variety to spice up combat. But as if the game was listening to this script being written after the playthrough, my prayers were answered in the form of Nightkin, a special type of super mutant that had less health and cloaking that only made them untargetable. Surely this would throw a wrench in my endeavors, right? Or would it go exactly the same as all the other enemies before them? Cool in theory, but something tells me this game wasn't thought of with a melee-only focus. After finding the terminal needed to open the vent system, I returned to the dwellers, who informed me that I would need to go ahead to the underground labs and put a stop to the super mutants attacking. Sure, anything you say, Chief. As long as I get a better weapon, I'm set. This is where we get introduced to Deathclaws, and honestly, as much as I hate to say it, these guys overstayed their welcome way too fast. For one, the ruin starts out with just a handful of them to get you used to them. But literally 2 hallways later, I was fighting hordes of them. And if you thought these guys had anything on their ancestors that were in Fallout 1 or 2 or even the 3D entries later on, you'd be mistaken. The only reason I had to use more stimpaks than normal was due to the sheer amount of these bastards all attacking at the same time and dying just as fast. It got to the point where I was just running past enemies because it wasn't worth the resources or the time to fight them all. If it ever gets to the point where the players are rushing your game because they're bored and you thought that more enemies equaled more fun, it probably needed more time to cook. I eventually found a boss fight with a Mother Deathclaw that more resembled Godzilla, but you know how the fight went at this point. Since I had a perk that healed me when I stepped in radiation, I ran straight at her and punched her with my sword, only for her to run to the other side of the room and also heal in a pool of radiation. So the whole fight boiled down to smacking her, then chasing after her, hoping I could get more hits in before she completely healed all the damage. Cool design, but I'm thinking Kane might be a perfect counter for this fight. This mama had nothing on the Deathclaws at Quarry Junction. I mean, hell, none of these Deathclaws had anything on any of the later entries. I tried using a rocket launcher on her for shits and giggles, but in comparison to the sheer damage of my Tesla blade, it was not only faster, but more effective for her to just inspect my blade with her forehead. Now, with the ruins sorted, or something, I headed back to the vault only to find the dwellers under attack from super mutants. And upon seeing this, I knew I had to go kill Addis to finish the game. And if you thought for 1 second that this wouldn't involve killing scores and scores of super mutants and mandatory kill rooms, you'd be wrong. But it did have a big boss battle that actually did damage to me for once, which was a nice change of pace. Except upon heading back into a computer room, it totally didn't get stuck on terrain, which resulted in it being turned into target practice. After that Deathclaw, I was just killing stuff to killing stuff. I just wanted out of here at this point. Eventually I found a mutated Addis later on who finally revealed the reason for the attack. It turns out that the super mutants were just trying to find a way to get it up after their master failed to do so. But the experiments only made it worse for them and caused Addis to change into a monster. Cue the boss fight. The first phase of the fight was pretty standard Nightkin behavior, but at half health Addis leveled up and got stun locked by automatic plasma fire. I'd say I was surprised at this point, but honestly, man, I don't even know what to say anymore. With Addis dead, he exploded into plant spores that spread throughout the fight, kind of like Enmu taking over the Mugen train from Demon Slayer. But now came a more gimmicky kind of boss fight, which is cool, but kind of annoying at the same time. I had to destroy tentacles to reveal weak points growing around the area. This combined with more of these killer bugs was more tedious than I had originally thought, but all that means I had to do was just kite the enemies around and be a lot more jumpy with the stim packs. Once enough eyes had been destroyed, I had to deal with the mutant's mouthpiece, and at first I thought I was screwed due to not having any range and being swallowed anytime I got close. But it turns out if you just stand to the side of the head and turn it into a Beyblade, you will eventually win. Next came shitloads of more killer bugs that I sprinted past, and another mouth guarding the exit. Further in, I found the vault girl being eaten alive, but at least she was kind enough to completely tell me how to destroy the vault and take out everything inside. I pushed forward and had to fight even more mouthpieces and then arrived in a timed running section. Thankfully, this was a breeze in the park and nothing could have stopped me even if it tried. This triggered the final cutscene and ended the game. And there you have it, the infamous Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, the first Fallout game to ever hit consoles. Honestly, going in, I didn't have any kind of crazy high expectations for the game to completely blow me away, and I'll be honest, I wasn't extremely disappointed. It was one of those things where I knew it didn't have a good reputation, so I don't think that tainted anything. But at the same time, I've played twin-stick shooters and stuff like this before, so it's not that far out of what I'm familiar with. Is it a Fallout game? In the namesake, maybe some tie-ins from the first games and whatnot, but at its core, no. And what's interesting is I don't know why Interplay just didn't take the formula that they had for Fallout 1 and 2 and just put it into like a 3D setting, because that's what Van Buren kind of looked like it was shaping up to be anyway. But that's neither here nor there, so we'll never know. With that being said, I want to thank all of you that watched the entire video, and I want to give a special shout out to all of the patrons and all of the channel members for joining me on this wild ride. For all the goofiness that the game was, it was actually still an enjoyable time to hang out with you guys and banter over what was happening. And on Monday, we'll do it all again with something else! Make sure to take care of yourselves in the coming days. As always, I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I will see you guys on the next one.